The Watchers. That's right, folks. This is the new film from new director. New loosely. She directed some other stuff for television, the show that her father made. But this is Ishana Shyamalan's debut feature as a filmmaker on a big theatrical release. The daughter of M. Night Shyamalan. We're not going to have the Nepo baby conversation. We don't need to have it. You are well aware of that solely because of her name. She's not new to this world. It's not like this is the first thing she's ever worked on. But again, it's in a genre her dad is familiar with, and her dad's producing this, and she worked on her dad's show. So just remember that when you watch this. It's The Watchers. It's based off a book or a story concept. I'm sure you've maybe read it or you haven't. I haven't. I'm probably not going to, because it's kind of a boring movie, if you can imagine such a thing happening. Yeah, oh man, this is an interesting one. I'm always excited for a new filmmaker. I'm always excited for a new Nepo project. I know I said I don't want to dwell on that too much, but I really like the course that M. Night Shyamalan's been on for his past couple movies, like Old and Knock at the Cabin and Trap. Two of them are great. One of them looks really good. Can't wait to see Trap. So in between those, here's a little project that his daughter's working on. It's kind of exciting. You know, the vibe of this is really good. The trailers have a really interesting vibe to it. People locked in like this room. There's things that watch them in the night. What does it all mean? If you have no context for the story, that could literally be anything. And that's kind of a cool conceit to play with. Very classic, very low budget, very of the Night Shyamalan genre. So that's exciting. You know, something in that vein, homaging the stuff her father made. I'm very curious to see what that could look like. Unfortunately, it's not that interesting. Now, Ishana not only directed this, she wrote it. She wrote the adaptation. You know, it's not her original work, but she adapted what the story was and made it into this. And I guess there's a lot of like first time jitters that can go into a project like this, and I completely get that. So I don't want to hold it against her for making something that is disjointed, because you gotta learn. You know, it's rare in today's climate you see like a young burgeoning filmmaker work out the kinks in their work, and if we can see her career take off in other directions, I'm sure that'd be really cool. But as it stands, this movie has a lot of disjointed feeling to it. The pacing is very weird. It doesn't end. Like the act structure, the first act, great setup. The second act kind of dwindles in itself. Third act, you think there's a third act that's going to end, and then it doesn't, and then you're like, this is the end, and then it's not the end, and then you're like, this is the end, and it's like, no, this isn't the end. A very abysmal third act. And it really defeats any flow we were having throughout the piece, where there is tension, suddenly there isn't. Where there could be like a cathartic ending, suddenly there isn't one. Where there could be resolution, suddenly we have another scene on top of the denouement, on top of the denouement, and it never truly ends, and it just loses itself. And that's a bummer, because there's a lot of other stuff working in favor of this picture. The pacing's bad, the way it tells its story is bad, but the editing is strong, the visuals are strong, the way the camera works, it's very good. There's a lot of good stuff in there. It's one of the clearest examples of like, you really know how to make something look good, but you just don't have anything else perfectly honed in yet. You don't have the structure of a 100-minute film figured out. You don't really know what you want your actors to do in a perfect scale, because there are some disjointed moments of character beats, of acting choices that don't look great. And the dialogue work and the script work, it's very obvious and doesn't fully work when this is a show that is relying on you to care and feel about everything going on. If we're just looking at a picture, looks pretty good, but we're not. These characters have to feel something and mean something. And while there is tension in some specific moments, it definitely loses itself throughout the piece. And then we do a lot of over-explaining for stuff we don't need to. And perhaps that might be the greatest fault of this film, is over-explaining and over-analyzing the specific moment than what we need it to be. Your audience is aware of the tropes. They know what we're in for. Your name alone is what we're in for, right? Don't over-explain everything, because then you're going to lose your momentum and your feeling. When you start adding stuff on top of stuff, it doesn't hold itself together well. But you know what? Dakota Fanning continues to be pretty good. I can't say I disliked her in a lot of her recent choices. This one is a solid performance with what she is asked of. You buy most of it, if even the dialogue's a little weird and wonky, but she can handle herself well, and she does for the most part. She's given a supporting cast that is pretty good. Georgina Campbell is really exciting to see and stuff like this. I want her to pop off more because this should be a role that you're like the second lead essentially for like a big horror film. You should feel more exciting. It just doesn't. For a young director, I can't be disappointed with what we're seeing. You're handling the property and the images well, and the actual like narrative conceit of the piece, you do enough where you're like, okay, this is kind of interesting. There's enough going on there that makes it feel like it's a fully realized idea. So I appreciate that aspect of it where, okay, we have to get in this building, be in there by nighttime, or the things in the woods are going to kill us. So how do we live? How do we keep going? The daytime, we do these specific things. We go to these specific locations. Here's the distance you can go. Here's what everyone's role is. That's all good. The moment you start explaining what's happening and what these creatures are about, that is where it loses a lot of its steam. Because then we just dwell on that for a long time in the third act, and you just feel yourself wanting to check your watch or check your phone and just get out of there as quickly as you can. Which is quite a shame for a thing like this. And for a movie that's kind of billing itself as a horror movie, it's not that scary. It is probably more suspenseful. There are a few moments that can scare, and it's definitely more scary if you like are afraid of like people watching you. Like I have a thing about open doors and like windows that don't have curtains on them. I hate the idea of just like somebody in a situation looking at you. That is a lot of this movie where it's almost like it could be a metatextual narrative of like we as people in this day and age are just being viewed by everyone around us, and it can like perceive your reality a different way. But it's also just a literal box for people to be inside of where weird things watch them. So I'm not going to go too hard to like the meta textual narrative side of that shit, because I don't think the story wants you to think like that. This is really just like a what you're seeing is what's happening. That's literal. That's the M. Night Shyamalan approach. That's Ishana's approach. I'm not going to be mad at that. I'm not going to be mad at what this movie's trying to do, because it does it, just not perfectly. And what these creatures are and the whole conceit around them, well, that is something, isn't it? That is definitely a direction you went. That's interesting. And then you really went with it hard in the end. I don't want to spoil it, but I'll just say, if you know anything about the supposed history of like beings that existed, of folklore, I should say, a lot of that in here, which is interesting. But for a horror movie, it's not that scary. And for a first time, feature film, does the job fine. Just fine. You're going to get enough out of it. I hope so, at least, because I want to see more from this director. Small budget with a big enough cast like this, you could do something special. I think we could see more things special in this style. So that's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. So, The Watchers, I'm going to give a 4 out of 10. Now, thank you all for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And of course, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.